Welcome back to Captains of Industry. Still in the studio with me, I have Pieter Uys, the CEO of Vodacom. Earlier you mentioned your son and your daughter, and interestingly, I had a conversation recently with Nikki Newton-King, the CEO of the JSE, asking her about work-life balance. And she's very clear about this. In her diary, if her son has a rugby game, she puts Jonathan's rugby match at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday and attends the rugby match. Where do you stand on work-life balance?
No, I definitely agree with her. It's not always easy, and I've probably neglected my family over the last couple of years. I remember in the early days, I used to take them with me when I went network trialing on weekends and testing the network. But it's about also clearing your mind. You have to find a balance. You can't just think work, because then you won't come up with new ideas. So I like to find a balance between work, family, and myself. You need time for yourself as well.
And part of yourself is the sports aspect, because you are very diligent in terms of keeping fit. How do you make time for it? Again, I think that these questions may seem very simple, but people really battle with the number of hours in a day and dedicating some time to yourself or to keeping fit.
But you should see it as part of the whole you. I get up early in the morning, get up at 5 or 5:30, like this morning, I spent 45 minutes on the bicycle. It's indoor, it's too cold to go outside. But while I'm cycling indoor, I watch the TV, and I just either watch something relaxing or watch a bit of news. And I do the cycling on weekends, and I firmly believe if you have a stressful moment at work and you really want to find a solution to it, you must go and do something completely different, because that's when the mind just opens itself, and I promise you will find the answers to it. So many times when I go cycling with my friends on the weekend and I come back, I've solved all the issues that I had during the last week, and I can go fresh into the new week.
You worked for a long time with Alan Knott-Craig, and I've had these discussions with him. How does your leadership style differ to what Alan Knott-Craig brought to the table?
As if I think, so I don't know what he's like now, but if I think back at Vodacom, I can speak more about Vodacom, and it was right at the time. As you build a company, you need more direct leadership. You have to tell everybody all the time where we're going and how we're doing it. And I think Vodacom's come to a point where we don't need a lot of that. It's a big ship, part of a big international company, and we have to give more delegation to the team, give more authority to them. And I've been trying to do that, to get the team to also think and come up with ideas, take some chances, because if you don't take chances, if you don't take risks, you also won't develop. So I think that's a big leadership aspect that I've tried to instill into the organization, is participative, but not completely handing over. At some points, a leader has to make the decision, but to find that balance between participative leadership and making a decision in the end.
When it comes to leaders, captains of industry, we often think that those that are in those positions of power are infallible. They don't make mistakes. They've got there because they've got a perfect track record. Have you made mistakes?
Plenty, and you always learn through them, and you always become better as an organization and as a person. We can just think over the last year, we had this Black Thursday last year, 30 June. So I've crossed out all 30 Junes out of my life when our network had a big glitch last year. But out of it, I also learned how you speak and how you respect customers and how you keep them informed about what's happening. So in the end, that Black Thursday, through the learning, has turned out to be something good for us, because we've really become more customer focused after that, and we've improved the network as well.
What would you say is the essence to crisis communication, taking what you learned from Black Thursday?
So some in the company at the time said, look, we can't get hold of anybody. It's Thursday evening, 6 o'clock, let's just keep quiet. But as I drove home that evening, I said, this is not right. So I turned back, I went back to the office, I sat with the engineers, and I logged on to Twitter at the time, because that was the only way I could figure out that I could communicate. And I started communicating to every person that had something bad to say that evening about the company. I personally replied to them. And what was so fascinating was, an hour later, and continuously there were more bad news coming through. Some of those previously upset customers started defending Vodacom, saying good things about us. And I remember till 11 o'clock that night, I kept on saying, look, we're making inroads, we're about to be live again with everything. And it really helped. It really it is important to communicate down in the company, tell the company what's happening, but more importantly, speak to your customers directly.
How's Twitter changed your communication style? I mean, it is amazing to be able to send you a tweet and get a response back from the CEO of Vodacom. Do you believe it's changed your communication style?
Most definitely. I remember I first joined Twitter, it was on the 1st of April in 2009.
But it wasn't an April Fool's joke.
It wasn't an April Fool's joke. So initially, I did it to also follow influential people, to know what's happening in the world. Because up till that point in time, my media people in the company, every morning they brought me tons and stacks of paper of what's happening in the world. And I found out that if you follow the right people, you can really know, like you, if you follow, you can really know.
I take that as a compliment.
You really know what's happening in the world. But then I also, people discovered that I was on Twitter, and they started copying me when they had something bad to say about Vodacom, and it really hurt. So I said, let's see what happens. Let me personally take responsibility for some of those complaints. And I think it paid off. So I enjoy communicating. I enjoy caring about, even if it's the smallest complaint. And now today we have a whole group of people manning our Twitter account. We have a Vodacom Twitter account. Immediately thereafter, we also started Vodacom, or at Vodacom 111, which is our customer line on Twitter. I think it's probably one of the first in the world.
Do you think other CEOs should embrace the Twitter application or the Twitter platform? Slowly, we're seeing more high-profile captains of industry coming into the space, but do you think it's something they should take a lot more seriously?
Either personally or as the company, it's something you can't ignore, because customers change. We get more and more younger customers, and they definitely communicate differently. If I look at my kids, they call less, they communicate more through Twitter, Facebook, messaging, instant messaging. So if you, as a company, not represented there, you will lose that segment of the market. So very important. Coming
back to the Vodacom story, one of the bigger challenges has been some of your expansions into territories beyond South Africa, and namely the DRC, where obviously there has been negative news flow out of that territory. How have you dealt with those challenges, and how do you see Vodacom going forward with their Africa strategy?
So as a start, I would like to say that yes, we've struggled, not just in the DRC. Our performance out of the African portfolio has not been the best up till recently. So we made some changes. We really started focusing on the African portfolio. And when we did our quarterly update now recently, the Africa portfolio contributed 21% to the revenue. So it's becoming meaningful. We went through times where there was fierce competition. We didn't know how to respond to that immediately, so we learned. But now we've learned, we've corrected things, we've changed the way we run the businesses, and we are the number one network in those countries again.
And again, is there a key formula to operating in Africa?
There's not one formula. The countries differ so much. Initially we made that mistake. We thought we're now successful in South Africa, we can just copy it. It is not true. If you take a country like Tanzania and DRC, people behave differently. In the one country, they would recharge electronically more easily. In another country, they want to feel the piece of paper that your pen is written on. So those things, subtle differences, but it makes a big difference in the end. DRC specifically, never give up. It's been a long uphill battle. The business is doing very well at the moment. We've not had to put money into it. The business is looking after itself financially. Good leadership there. There are some issues that we still have to sort out. And again, I'm saying we're not going to give up, because I believe in the country. I've been to the DRC so many times. Probably the most friendly people that you can find anywhere in the world are in the DRC. And they've had their own issues, but they're working through it. The potential in the DRC is so huge. There's not a mineral, I think, that's not in the DRC. So they're resource rich. Penetration, sub 20%. So the potential is just huge, and communication is part of their solution as well.
One of the biggest challenges in the telecommunications industry must be keeping up with the innovation that is out there. And now we've got to look at voice versus data. It must be a constant challenge for you and your team. 5 years out, how do you think the landscape is going to appear in telecommunications?
So 5 years is a long time. Things happen very
Absolutely,
quickly.
in the life of the telco industry.
So if I think 5 years, it's probably going to be dramatically different. because if I just look at the last 2 years, how it's changed. So 5 years out, everybody will have a smartphone. You will only get smartphones. You will not be able to buy a normal phone. And we're seeing that trend. With a smartphone then, it is all about communicating. It's not about making the call, it's about being connected. So I think we'll see a lot more customers buying a service from us where they have peace of mind and they just pay for their communication services. And it'll include voice and data and messaging, and they'll just do whatever they want to do and stay connected. But communication will in 5 years' time become much more sophisticated. The devices, I'm sure that the phone that you and I have now has more processing power than the first Apollo moon ship that went to land on the moon.
You are obviously integral to the communication story in South Africa, and we've only got 1 minute left. Do you think that you're going to, and as you said, it's too early to tell what you're going to do next, but you're passionate about what you do. Can we assume that you'll still incorporate something in communication, or am I pushing you too hard on that front?
South Africa is a small country here, and telecommunications is part of the future, and there's a direct feedback from telecommunications in economic development, so you can't run away from it. So whatever I do, there'll always be a part of communications in there.
Pieter, thanks so much for your time. That's a wrap of this edition of Captains of Industry. Until next time, from myself, Bronwyn Nielsen, goodbye.